I'm Laura Ketzel, and welcome to Adapt to the New Unstable Normal, How to Secure the Roaring 2020s. I'm the head of European research for Forrester, but I'm also a cybersecurity research analyst by trade and training. And I'm lucky enough to be a member of the advisory board and the program committee for RSA conference. So I'd welcome your feedback, not just on this session, but on the whole track and indeed on conference as a whole. So to set the stage for this session a bit, this is one of our big picture sessions for the Securing the Remote Workforce track. I'm going to endeavor to talk about not just what we need to think about for the next 6 months to a year, but rather for the entire decade. So hence the roaring 2020s. And to that end, strange as it may be, the benefits of virtual are that I can take questions in the chat while the virtual me is actually presenting. So feel free to ask me your questions or give me your feedback, indeed, the entire time, as opposed to at the very end. So with all the housekeeping done, let's talk about the roaring 2020s, which of course brings to mind images like this. So I personally cannot wait to dance in front of the US Capitol, albeit I understand there's some fencing there now, or in Dam Square here in Amsterdam, a little closer to where I live, once cases are finally down enough and the restrictions are lifted and we're actually allowed to be less than 1.5 meters from the next person over. And because this has been such a difficult 15-ish months, I definitely expect a bunch of 1920s style decadent partying once that's allowed. But post 2021, sadly, the roaring 2020s are going to be a little less Gatsby and a lot more adaptation to upswellings of systemic risk, as it were. And that's not just future pandemics, grim as it is to think about those given where we are now, but also geopolitical risk, climate risk, sort of risk in domestic politics, wherever you are, social unrest, etc. The next decade for all of us in information security, this is not a change, is indeed going to be a may you live in interesting times kind of thing. So if you enjoy interesting, this is the decade for you. So, but on the positive side, right, all of us spent the last 15 months staring at a lot of very scary exponential graphs. And this, though, is a positive graph in which lines go up and to the right. So a vaccination graph instead of a case and death graph, like the ones we spent lots of time looking at over the past year. So really exciting to see these lines going up and to the right. And let's keep that in mind as we think about kind of where we are and where we're going over the next decade. So in addition to lots of scary and now actually hopeful graphs, the last 15 months have brought us kind of an explosion in and an expansion to the universe of the possible. So hence my big bang picture here. Because in addition to the human and economic toll of the pandemic over the last 15 months, we've also made radical changes to all sorts of things. We did things that were previously thought of as just downright impossible or indeed vanishingly difficult because we had no choice. And so our challenge now is to sort through those changes and figure out which will stay, which will change, which we want to keep, which we want to get rid of. And of course, because this is our RSA conference, how to secure them. So to that end, I'm going to describe all of this in terms of 5 pandemic connected shifts that we at Forrester think are going to change business and technology forever, which sounds like a pretty big claim, but hopefully I'll show you that it's not an overblown one. And again, as I said, because this is our RSA conference, I'm going to talk about how to secure those. So I will tackle those 5 pandemic connected shifts in 3 broad timeframes. And, apologies for the kind of quadraticness of this, but just bear with me. Here are the 3 timeframes we'll consider those shifts in. So the short term, which is the next 18 months, which is the kind of big lift on sort of vaccinating people and getting the virus out of our proverbial systems. And then medium term, which is 18 months through 5 years. And then the long term, which is 5 years and beyond through the rest of the decade. So what are those 5 shifts? Let's talk about them. So in the first place, we've got customer expectations that'll shift on the spectrum of safety and convenience, businesses that'll be riding the digital engagement wave that we've had with the changes in the pandemic to create hybrid experiences. Firms and governments are going to be investing in the once thought impossible to drive the future of work forward differently. And smart companies are going to retire technical debt quickly and then ride the tech disruption wave. And finally, a boon for all of us in the general world of information security and privacy, business resiliency is going to become a competitive advantage, not just for us, but for our companies and our organizations, and indeed for the world as a whole. So let's tackle that first shift first. So customer expectations will be shifting on the spectrum of safety and convenience. And here's what that means across those three timeframes. In the short term, consumer risk aversion and desire for convenience are going to coexist. And what this will result in is a lot of behavior that looks really contradictory. So to give one example, most US and Italian consumers say that they're going to try to avoid crowds for the next 24 months. But at the same time, 48% of online adults in Italy and 40% of those in the US want to return to stores and shop normally as soon as possible. Those two things are completely contradictory, but it reflects not bad survey design on our part, or at least I don't think so, but genuine conflict in consumers. And if you think about how you yourself feel, you'll probably see some of that conflict in yourself as well. In the medium term, empowered consumers are going to vote for values with their wallets. So what I mean by this is that as kind of employment recovers, economies recover post-pandemic, because we should see a post-pandemic boom if we do this right in a lot of places, consumers will have purchasing power again. And they're going to use that purchasing power to kind of act on the things they thought about a lot while they were stuck at home during the pandemic. Namely, what kind of companies, what kind of products do I want to invest my money in that support the causes that I believe in, whether that be environmental sustainability or investment in the local community or supporting various kinds of particular causes, et cetera. And so consumers are going to be directing their spending even more than before to brands that they trust that connect them to those values. And finally, in the long term, choice of experience is going to become the new luxury status symbol. So the pandemic accelerated digital adoption unbelievably because we had no choice. And as companies use their physical spaces, so stores, stadiums, car showrooms, et cetera, in new ways, and limit the access to those physical spaces in kind of future pandemic or other types of situations, you will have only consumers who can pay for that sort of value of being in that physical space who have access to it. And you'll also see things like consumers who lack the rights to their data statutorily. So I live in the European Union, so I have a whole bunch of statutory rights to my personal data. Plenty of you do in your jurisdictions as well, but there are plenty of places where you don't. And so consumers will be using sophisticated tools to make sure that they limit their data and the access to it to providers that they trust. So what does that mean for security? So let's talk short, medium, and long here. So in the short term, we'll need to secure no-touch customer experiences. So the pandemic has wrought a ton of innovation in making experiences sort of less physical contact so that they're less risky. So one of my favorites is the car company Geely in China was delivering keys to new cars to customers by drone. As the customers stood on their balconies, the drone would fly up to them and give them their keys. And there's all kinds of other stuff like that, like sort of one-use disposable button pushers and stuff like that. So all of us in security need to secure those experiences because they increase our attack surface. If your keys are flying around with drones, all of a sudden that's a thing you have to secure that you probably never considered before. Secondly, we have to invest in non-creepy anti-fraud techniques because you've got a bunch of consumers who've gone digital. So older consumers, people who just preferred physical channels, who like digital, but they're just less used to different kinds of fraud detection and sort of those kinds of things. And so we have to make those techniques more kind of amenable to them as well. And lastly, something fun for our privacy friends is that their budgets are growing based on all of the survey work that we've done. In 2020, they doubled their privacy budgets on average. And in 2021, only 7% of respondents are expecting to reduce that. So they've got more funding, so work together. Secondly, in the medium term, we're going to need to build provenance and sustainability verification stuff that scales. So consumers voting with their values means if we conform to those values, we need to be able to show that we do. And so that's going to mean things that are not very long questionnaires. There will eventually be blockchain-based solutions for this that work. So kind of look out for those and test them. And we also need to rework our application security to handle adaptive technology. So by adaptive technology, I mean stuff for accessibility. So those older and previously physical only consumers, and indeed consumers with various kinds of limitations, both physical, visual, etc., will also be using digital more. And so it turns out that a lot of our application security tools see the scripting of clicks that adaptive technology for consumers who have trouble using mice with computers looks exactly like bot activity to application security tools, for just to use one example. So all of us and our UX design friends are going to have to take that into account as we secure these new kinds of experiences with new consumers. And in the long term, we're all going to need to integrate with those customer data lockers that I was talking about earlier, where consumers control the release of their data to you in very tangible ways. And we also need to build security and privacy controls that translate seamlessly between the physical and the digital realm and back, because we're going to have people moving through those hybrid experiences that we talked about, and also those kind of experience-driven physical venues, like the sort of complete surround stadium experience that we've seen so much about, and so on. So that's how to secure the stuff from the first shift. Now, let's talk about the second shift. So businesses are going to ride the digital engagement wave to create hybrid experiences. So let's break that down across those three timeframes again, and then we'll talk about how to secure them. So in the short term, that first 18 months, an initial wave of new experiences rolled out pretty quickly are going to compromise customer experience quality. So as businesses have operated under a whole bunch of constraints, they've rolled out a load of digital experiences of varying levels of quality. And so consumers are eventually going to stop being tolerant of that. There was a certain amount of, okay, it's a pandemic, I get it. But as consumers wish to continue to use those experiences, you're going to have to make sure that they actually scale and work properly, and indeed deliver the emotional resonance of the in-person experiences that a lot of these consumers used before. In the medium term, a new breed of hybrid and values-based experiences is going to emerge. So you're going to have companies and sort of organizations pursuing two strategies. So there are going to be lots of hybrid physical digital experiences, like sort of touchless mobile check-in and all that kind of stuff at hotels. And we're also going to design experiences that focus on customer outcomes, such as saving money or protecting the environment. As discussed before, we were talking about values. And so we're going to have to measure these experiences differently. And then finally, in the kind of engagement and experience realm, in the long term, anticipatory experiences. So the sort of much more sophisticated version of, well, usually you're looking for this kind of product, so I'm going to advance you into a journey searching for that kind of product when you come to my app or my other experience, will sort of clash with people's expectations about privacy, as in consumers have sort of lots of contradictory impulses when it comes to how much they want you to know about them and how they're going to react to you displaying what you know about them. So all of us in information security and our friends in privacy and experience design are going to have to figure out how to actually make these anticipatory experiences work in a non-creepy way, if you will. And so that the sort of consumers don't say, I am uncomfortable with the way that this company or this organization is using the things that they knows about me. Okay, so how do we secure these things across those three timeframes? So for the short term, enjoy the temporary respite for a little while longer. So you'll have fewer customer complaints about security controls because they know that you need them when you're doing all kinds of digital things. And indeed, knowledgeable consumers have read lots of articles about the uptick in different kinds of fraud during the pandemic. And so they're grateful that you're actually trying to protect them. In the second place, you're going to have more direct to consumer that makes aggregators more attractive targets. So for example, if your company sells through Shopify or similar, you should expect Shopify and similar to be big targets for different kinds of attackers. And thus you may find yourself with a data breach or other problem that comes through one of those aggregators. So you need to be prepared to respond to something like that. And for all of us here in Europe, we're going to need some more controls to deter QR code fraud in payments, because we've had a sort of really interesting renaissance in QR codes for digitizing online payments over the last little while, and those are liable to continue. So those are going to draw more scammers, so we need security controls to protect against them. In the medium term, we're going to need to implement security controls that cross digital physical boundaries. And so I talked a lot about hybrid experiences earlier, and the security controls should transfer across the different elements of those experiences. And so it's going to be up to us to design controls where that is easy to do and indeed consistent. And secondly, we're going to need better controls to make values-based choices affordable to more consumers. So we can, by implementing sort of at scale things like provenance and kind of sustainability and carbon credit verification, make those sort of attributes more affordable to a mass market of consumers that will want them. And so this is one of those places where things that we can do in the world of security actually make a real difference to our business's top and bottom line. So that's something to really investigate and learn how to do in a non-questionnaire based way over the medium term. And in the long term, we can use software security controls to match anticipatory experiences to the comfort of customers. So we can use security controls to make sure our developer friends build systems that know customers, but that don't cross over into the creepy. So security controls can actually help not just comply with regulations and do all the things that developers usually don't care about, but actually make the experiences better and more accessible to consumers, even when they're sort of anticipatory and thus have a lot of potential to cause backlash. So moving to the third shift, companies and governments are going to invest in things that once seemed nigh impossible to drive the future of work forward. So this one gets really speculative. So bear with me here. This is the fun part. So in the short term, companies that have shown a lot of empathy through this pandemic period and as we come out of it in investing in their employees are going to gain a creative edge. So all of us who I'm lucky enough to work for a company that I feel like handled the sort of unprecedented challenges pretty well. And some of you probably are also. Their employers that did that are going to kind of reap some dividends in the sense that all of us employees who feel as though their employer did that are more likely to stick around as the job market improves. And all of our sort of research into this tells us that those employees bring more creative ideas to the table. They invest more in the kind of future progress of their employer. So that creative edge is really going to matter as talent that has lots of movement possibilities sticks around over this short-term period, and it'll pay dividends kind of on through the whole decade. So in the medium term, this is where our policy friends in the public sector come in. So they're already working to seize on the new possibilities of this new world of work. And so as employment levels recover at varying rates of speed, depending on the place, you're going to have a lot of remote working boosting the exurbs of big economic hubs. Like you've probably all seen articles about the sort of house sales in the suburbs of major cities outpacing the growth in house prices in the centers of the cities themselves. And so that sort of will continue for a while. You're going to have firms shedding a bunch of their high cost city center office space and turning it into kind of hot desk working. And you'll also see supply chain diversification giving a boost to lower cost regions of rich countries with good transport links. So places like Extremadura in Spain and so on, because there'll be a bunch of government incentives to attract some reshored manufacturing. And in the long term, work is going to get redistributed, which will slow hyper-urbanization. So this is the big speculative one, which is we've got lots of people who have transitioned to kind of what we plan to be 2 days in the office, 3 days out of the office kinds of remote work and all kinds of permutations thereof. So you're also going to have people, particularly with in-demand skills. So I'm looking at you, information security people who are here and privacy people and pretty much everyone who attends our RSA conference. We have the opportunity to live in very different places, as do other folks with sort of rare on-the-ground skills. And that distributes economic activity more evenly. And so provided there are adequate kind of broadband and knowledge infrastructure investments, including in kind of regions of developing countries like the Philippines and Vietnam, you will see a lot more even distribution of the kind of people pulling down the big salaries, which will create more evenly distributed economic activity overall. And you will get more affordable kind of megacities as a lot of that office space gets repurposed as living space. So this is all, it sounds like a lot of rampant speculation, but there are a lot of reasons to believe that if policymakers do things right, and if things go sort of as we're expecting them to, that these shifts, even these speculative long-term ones, will actually happen. So what does that mean for all of us in security? So for this shift, we are going to, in the short term, see that we got some blocking and tackling to do. So let's talk about that first. So we need to ensure that the return to work, return to office plans that our companies are putting into place and our organizations are putting into place actually match employee privacy expectations and the actual applicable laws. So we need to balance the health and safety of the workforce with individuals' rights and freedoms, privacy, confidentiality. This is not an easy thing. And we need to comply with the regulatory requirements that are changing. So we've got to make sure that the things we're doing are lawful and ethical, and that they also align with the expectations of our employee base so that we can keep those employees we talked about before. So that's a tough challenge. And all of you who are listening to me talk right now are the best people to do it. So that's something really important to focus on over the next 18 months, and indeed in the very immediate term. Second thing we need to do is replace the sort of duct tape and string, quick and dirty, secure remote work stuff we put in place because we needed to do it really fast with permanent solutions that will allow us to fall back to 100% remote work when we need to, because that may not be the design point for our company, but in the event of a natural disaster, another pandemic, you name it, we're going to need it. So we want this functionality available to us. And indeed, if you attend a lot of the rest of this track, there are a lot of helpful sessions on kind of a lot of detail of exactly how to do this. And thirdly, this is one that seems obvious once you hear about it, but you wouldn't necessarily think of it right out of the gate, is you should plan for your insider threat detection models to break again, because they broke when you all went remote, and they're all going to break again when you go back to your return to work hybrid scheme, because your old scheme, where like most people were in an office, and your nearly 100% remote scheme, neither one of those apply anymore as the workforce goes back in a hybrid fashion. So plan to kind of rebuild your model, and if you forget to endure a lot of detection alarms very quickly. So definitely take the time to do this as you go back into a hybrid model so that you have a workable insider threat detection model and you don't drive yourselves nuts with a lot of false alarms. In the medium term, if you haven't already and you have call centers, tool up to secure permanently virtual ones. If you hadn't already run kind of mostly virtual kind of call center work before, the pandemic has shown that it absolutely can be done. And there are a lot of advantages for retaining employees and for kind of having less turnover and all the rest of it. So expect your company to want to do that. Make sure you have the tools to do it and to secure it. And secondly, design for the continued convergence of employee and consumer privacy expectations, in the sense that all of us are consumers when we go home at night, or, well, when we sort of leave our home offices at night at the moment. And so we bring our consumer privacy expectations with us to the workplace. And so your employees are going to continue to feel that way. And so it's going to be up to all of us to make sure that whatever our companies do is more conformant with employee expectations and is not Orwellian and conforming to the horror stories that many of us have heard so many of over the course of this pandemic. And then thirdly, in the long term, we'll need to be ready to deploy entire secure edge in a container type modules to small sites in developing countries. This is sort of part of the long-term speculation, right? So as work redistributes to different places outside kind of the major city, first world country locations that a lot of you are most familiar with, we're going to have small sites in countries that don't always have all of the infrastructure that one might expect. And so we're going to need kind of secure edges for those people to work with, because we can't just expect them to, use the services deployed out of the cloud in some faraway place, because there's just not enough connectivity. And secondly, we're going to need to bolster employee trust in management to drive faster innovation. So the most valuable resource most of our companies have is all of us who go to sleep every night after we finish up working. And so if we trust our employers, we feel they invest in us, and then we will invest in them. And sort of we will kind of put our best thinking into what we do for our companies. And we will have those ideas that spawn whole new product lines and develop whole new sort of modes of engaging customers, and indeed open whole new markets for our companies. So we want to make sure that we, in security and privacy and all the associated disciplines actually contribute to that. And because we're the ones who implement the controls, we have an opportunity to make sure that that actually happens. So fourth shift, smart firms are going to be retiring technical debt fast and then riding the tech disruption wave. In the short term, firms are going to keep accelerating their digital initiatives and reinforcing their foundations. So we did a lot of overnight migration to digital. It caused a lot of disruption, unleashed a lot of productivity. And so firms that are lucky enough to sort of either be able to say, okay, we're going to have stinky returns for a while, so let's not waste a good crisis, or that have grown a tremendous amount as a result of the pandemic, because of the sector they're in, or because they grabbed some opportunities sooner than everybody else. So those companies are going to either catch up with the digital leaders in their field if they were behind, or just leapfrog ahead if they were already close to the front. So they'll be replatforming, sort of all kinds of things to kind of either catch up with the leaders or to go faster. In the medium term, overhauling business models is going to transform kind of whole ecosystems in whole industries. So assuming that you kind of paid off a bunch of technical debt and leapfrogged ahead or caught up in that short term, you are going to be able to innovate and grow as the economies recover and as things start to really grow again. So whereas the companies that didn't do that either like pocketed the gains or sort of turtled up during the sort of difficult period, are going to be playing technology catch up again in 5 years. So there's all kinds of sort of stuff, like you'll see industry specific collaboration to develop transparent and flexible supply chains, because that's obviously a sort of big thing we need to shore up, because all of the disruptions over the past year, and then things like ships getting stuck in the Suez Canal for days, have brought home to us that sort of super lean and just in time sometimes causes big problems. So there's a lot to do to kind of build platforms and marketplaces and build Slack into those systems. And in the longer term, there's going to be a new sort of technology disruption cycle that will emerge after all this modernization, so 5 years and beyond. And in this disruption cycle, you're going to start to see kind of the general purpose technology investments by the public sector, in the university sector, and so on, start to pay dividends. So by this point, you want not to be clinging to the sort of winning strategies of the 2010s, so front-end apps and public cloud, because the S-curves on those will start to flatten. And so things like advances in electrification and further automation and robotics and changes in materials and all of those kinds of things, that's where the post 5-year innovation is going to be. So all of us need to be mindful of that and sort of think about how that's going to change things when we get there. And so as to how to secure this, we're retiring technical debt, which means there's a bunch of security stuff to be done. And in the first place, we should replace a bunch of old security stuff too. So all of us have overlapping bits of security tech and process that we don't need. And so now's the time to get rid of a bunch of it. Sort of in the very tactical, expect lots more Azure, because the pandemic has massively accelerated its adoption. You had lots of CIOs who went to Azure because of the pandemic and then said, yeah, okay, I'll take all the security stuff too. So where you've got a lot of pretty good enough security stuff in those bundles, you're going to want to use them, and it'll sort of cost you less, and so on and so forth. So think about this as you watch your company or your organization's Azure adoption curve, and just make sure to take advantage of it. In general, also, the corollary is to invest in cloud security. Probably super obvious, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. And lastly, we've had some interesting enthusiasm from an unexpected quarter. So lots of IT people in regulated industry have gotten really enthusiastic about BYOD and getting rid of all corporate devices as a result of the pandemic because they saw what was possible. And so it's going to be up to all of us to burst their bubble somewhat and just make sure we all kind of comply with the rules, because there's a lot of stuff we're still not allowed to do in regulated industry. So let's make sure that the enthusiasm doesn't carry us away. In the medium term, we have a lot of investing to do in operational technology security for all of those connected automated production lines that we have been building and will continue to be building. And indeed, this is a place where a lot of us don't know what we don't know. So make sure to spend time if you come from the kind of information technology side of security, like a lot of us do, me included. So make sure to spend time with people who actually know operational technology environments and who can help you think about them the right way. So this is where those exchange programs between OT and IT really start to pay off, both in general and in security. In the long term, I talked a little bit about blockchain and third-party risk management earlier. Yes, I know applying the blockchain sauce to everything is the new black, but in the long term here, blockchains are actually going to be mature enough for doing real useful third-party risk management at scale. And that's a way of getting rid of those horrible questionnaires forever, which I think we're all a big fan of. And secondly, we in this sort of information security and privacy and associated disciplines need to assume responsibility for securing those disruptive use cases with new technology that I was talking about before. So do not assume that the people who are developing those new materials, new battery technology, new automation, et cetera, have thought at all about how to secure them, because it's not what they do. And so this gives us a tremendous opportunity to be part of that big change and to really help it happen. So I suggest everybody bone up on all those kind of fundamental technology advances as they start to come along and think about what we can do to secure those things as they make their way into the real world. So in the fifth shift, business resiliency is going to become a competitive advantage. So let's break that down across the 3 timeframes again. So in the short term, firms are going to focus on essential risk management and business continuity maturity. So this is something that's been seriously underinvested in over the last 2 decades at least. And so to give you one kind of fun data point here, pandemics should have been considered to be inevitable. I remember hearing President Obama talk about the thing he was really worried about during the sort of tail end of his presidency was a global pandemic with a respiratory illness, which seems unusually prescient looking back. So, but when some colleagues of mine took a look at the Fortune 50's 10K reports, we saw that while 50% mentioned a pandemic in the risk profiles for investors, they classified it as like an act of God. Only Apple, of all of those companies, had done anything to ensure the downside. So there's a lot of work to be done in improving our risk management and our business continuity. And that needs to go on as soon as possible. In the medium term, supply chains are going to aim for redundancy, flexibility, and sustainability. So I talked a little bit about the sort of limitations that became very obvious during the pandemic, and indeed when ships get stuck in the Suez Canal, in just-in-time delivery models. And so there's going to be a lot of investment in diversification, in moving away from individual and regional sole suppliers, which means we need more visibility into supply chains and the ability to anticipate and respond to kind of nascent problems before they happen. And in the long term, this is a place where artificial intelligence will help us. So artificial intelligence enabled sort of enterprise risk management is going to help us handle uncertainty and systemic risk. So uncertainty is going to be a fact of life this decade. If there are any constant, I think we should just expect continuous change. And so enterprise risk management has historically not been much of a kind of digital leader. If anything, it's been a laggard. And so over the long term here, you're going to see it go to really embracing advanced technology so that risk management can be done in a much more sophisticated way. There are plenty of companies with sophisticated risk management people. Now they can take kind of the next technological leap and progress. So let's talk about how to secure this then. So this one's a security boom. It's easy to see how business resiliency being a competitive advantage is a good thing in the security world. But there's some things we need to do to respond to these investments, and I'll talk about those. So We haven't historically done a whole lot of aggregating security risk data with IT and operational risk data. That's something we need to start doing. We need to expand the definition of resiliency to include people matters. In the medium term, we need to look for unintended consequences of risk management decisions. We need to automate third-party risk management as companies diversify in those sort of supply chain aspects that I talked about. In the long term, we need to make explicit trade-offs of efficiency versus flexibility or reliability, because reliability and flexibility actually give you material returns in situations where disruptions happen often. So they're worth kind of quantifying explicitly and indeed investing in. So how should we apply all of this? I've given you lots of recommendations for how to secure these things in the short, medium, and the long term. So this is the tell them what you already told them section of my presentation, so that you have a few short-term things to walk away and do right after the conference, or indeed right after this presentation, if you're feeling really enthusiastic about them. Have at it. So secure those no-touch experiences. If you've got drones flying around with car keys and you haven't thought about the security of that, please do, and intervene as necessary. Here in Europe, the QR code security is a really important thing to do quickly because of all of the digitization of online payments that continues, and scammers have already gotten wise to it. Ensure that those return to work plans actually match privacy expectations and applicable regulations. As you start to move back into offices, that should be happening within a matter of months. That's something to focus on right now as those plans are getting formulated and disseminated. And upgrade those quick and dirty secure remote work tools, because you never know when you're going to have to fail back over to working remotely 100%, and it's going to happen fast, just like it did this time. So this way you'll be ready. And never waste a good crisis is a really good spirit to approach this with. Get rid of your old security tech while your company is replatforming. Future you, 18 months from now, will thank past you for doing this. And finally, invest in cloud security now if you haven't already, because you're going to have a heck of a lot more moving to the cloud, a lot more Azure, as I said earlier. So investing in those security tools and competencies is really going to pay dividends. And that is all of the scheduled programming, as they say. So thank you so much for hanging in there with me during this and for asking me questions as the presentation was rolling. In the slides, you will find links to the sort of key pieces of research that underpin a lot of the thinking in this presentation. So please do check them out after RSA conference and have a look at them and let them guide you as you go forward. Thanks so much, and have a great rest of conference.